hello and welcome to episode 49 of Gondor Calls for Ale, a Middle-earth strategy battle games podcast. I am, of course, your host, Sam Gallagher, and with me, as always, is my brother Ben.
Hello, and welcome to the show.
Yes, welcome to episode 49. What an exciting number. Not quite as exciting as the next episode will be, but still pretty cool. Moving on up in those numbers.
Almost halfway to 100. Very exciting stuff, Sam.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see what the future brings. But, Ben, to keep us in the present, please tell us what you're drinking this evening on episode 49.
Well, Sam, it wouldn't be a Gondor Calls for Ale episode if I wasn't a little bit on theme. So I have myself a Bear Claw hard seltzer. For the skin changer who may change his skin but is worried that he can't necessarily change back into those trousers he wore back in the early days, this is the drink for you.
Very good. Very good.
What about you, Sam? What are you having for this episode?
Well, Ben, also on theme, and perhaps from this dear listener, or maybe even a viewer, you will be able to tell what we're playing, because I am having a Beorn's Black Bear beer, Ben. It's a necessity to have before every game. As the Beornings say, it's the beer necessities, the simple beer necessities, that help you roll Heroic Strike.
That's fantastic, Sam.
So here's to my
Here's to that.
Necessities.
Yeah.
Don't cancel us, Disney. Don't find that tune. Don't hunt us down and close the episode.
So, as you may have been able to tell from our witty drinks, or perhaps Sam's clever episode title. I don't know what it is, but I'm sure it'll come up with a good one.
We'll find out.
We'll find out. In this episode, we will be talking about the Adepticon Doubles, Adepticon 2024 Doubles event, in which we played the Beornings.
Yes. It is sort of the perfect doubles army.
Oh, it's the perfect doubles army.
An 800-point event, so we're not even missing any points. It's very good. It's easily on theme, and the games go quickly.
They do.
Whether
They
you
do. Win or lose.
Quick or you lose quick, which is a big plus in my book.
Absolutely.
But before we go into what those army lists are that we're playing and how the event goes, we are going to give a quick shout out, a bit of a plug, to a gaming group in North Carolina who are running an event on April 20th. And that is, of course, the veterans of Helm's Deep, who one day, I'm sure Ben and I will actually manage to be free on the day they're having a tournament. But this event sounds awesome. And John, who runs them, always goes for a very themey event, which I'm a big fan of. So we have the theme is rumors of a growing threat are reaching our ears of an old enemy encroaching on your lands. You must seek out and determine what this threat is before it's too late and it destroys your way of life and threatens your family and friends, assuming orcs have friends. Your homeland has been called to answer. The horns, the drums of war are calling you to victory. To arms, throw back the enemy. Kill them all. To war. Sounds great. This is great. This is fantastic. And here are some of the actual crunchy details. It is in Hobbytown in Fayetteville, North Carolina. It is a 308-point event. I like it. 308 with 5 rounds, no legendary heroes, no red allies, a minimum of 8 models, and it is recommended to bring a horn or a drum. And that, again, is on April 20th, which, when this comes out, you should have a couple weeks. So definitely, we strongly recommend checking out those events. We wish, if I wasn't the best man at a wedding, I would definitely be there. Apparently, missing weddings, as we have covered previously in this podcast, for Middle-earth events is a little frowned upon.
Yeah, social faux pas there, Sam.
Yes, but enough of events to come, events that might yet come to pass. Something. There's Galadriel's line.
Galadriel's thing. Enough of events that some events that were whatever. We're
on to events that were. We are done talking about events that might yet come to pass. Anyway, so moving on after we've definitely nailed that on the first try. Moving on into our army lists, Ben, and here we go.
Complicated stuff with the Beornings.
If you're viewing as a viewer, assuming this All right. Well, with some serious technical difficulties there, who knows what that will look like in the video? Well, I certainly don't. But we were talking about being on to talking about army lists. So if I can now make them appear on screen, see, this is the difficulty of doing things video now, is we have all of this crap to deal with. Fantastic. They are, if you're a podcast listener, now on screen. If you're a YouTube viewer, they're on screen after a bit of a kerfuffle. So, Ben, do you want to go through this overly complicated army list?
Absolutely. In Army List 1, I suppose we have this backwards. Well, I'm going to read the proper one first. Leading the force is Beorn himself in his warband. There are 4 Beornings with hand-and-a-half axe. Sorry, no, they're not. There are 4 Beornings who have swapped their hand-and-a-half axe for Greatbow, and then there are 6 Beornings with the hand-and-a-half axe. That's Beorn's warband. And then we have Grim Beorn with the exact same warband. So we've got 4 Beornings with bows and 6 with axes. And that's largely because those are the models that we had.
Ish, kind of. It's funny, I think when we checked to see, because of course we are borrowing Jake's Beorning's army, which we always greatly appreciate. I think when we checked, you told me it was 3 bows, 7 axes, and there were actually enough Beorning models for that. There were not enough bows, or not enough painted bows. So unfortunately, we had to do a little bit of proxying with some rangers. Whoops. But figured it was better to have beautifully painted proxies than completely bare resin Beornings.
Yeah, indeed.
So ho-hum. I think we sort of both talked about this and both agreed that obviously this is technically, as written right now, an illegal army, but it's two separate armies, so, and the bow limit is across each of them. You don't share it, so we're not over bow limit, because otherwise we would be over bow limit. But we talked about this, and I think if you were running this as just a two, and just running this army just at a tournament as a single player, you want some number of bows. If you're playing in doubles, I really think the bows are...
You just pretty much leave them behind.
I would maybe make the argument that you maybe have 1 or 2, but for most of the scenarios, you're up in the face and you just want to be trucking along. But sometimes it's nice to be able to kill that horse accidentally, but...
Yeah, or have that guy sitting on the objective participating, but, you know...
All right. Well, I think we'll now move along hastily, perhaps, assuming my technology continues to work, into game 1. So, Ben, do you want to give us a run through of the scenario that we played in game 1?
I sure do. So we played Scenario Cornered, and for those of you viewing, you can of course see Sam's fancy. We can see the picture of the deployment zone. For those of you who are listening, we've got an interesting deployment zone. We've got some rings. We've got a 6-inch diameter circle, radius circle in the middle of the board, with another 6-inch no man's land between that, and then a ring 6 inches wide around that again. So Team A deploys their primary force in the center of the board. Team B can deploy anywhere within that ring. And then Team A's secondary force is anywhere within 3 inches of any of the board edges. So you've got this interesting one force with its leader in the middle of the board, surrounded by the other force, surrounded by the second half of the other force. It's, good old doubles, splitting up both forces all over the place. And this is a game that ends on a 1 or a 2 after one force has been broken. You score 1 victory point if the enemy leader... a team scores 1 victory point if their leader is alive at the end of the game. If Team A's leader is alive at the end of the game and has suffered no wounds, then they instead score 3 victory points. Team B scores 1 victory point for causing 1 or more wounds to the enemy leader. If they kill the enemy leader, instead they score 3 victory points. You score 1 victory point if the enemy force is broken at the end of the game, 3 if they are broken and you are not. You score 2 victory point if your team has more models within the center terrain feature, the center of the board, than your opponent. If your team has at least twice the number of models, you instead score 4 victory points. You score 1 victory point if you have at least 1 banner, 2 if you have a banner and your opponent doesn't. So the team that's deployed outside everyone else in the big ring, Team B, is trying to kill the leader of Team A, and Team A is trying to protect their leader, and everyone's trying to get into the middle, basically. And we were playing against Alisha and Richard, who had Azog and Bolg and Thimble and some Goblin Mercenaries.
Yeah, and importantly, because they weren't playing a Legendary Legion, the way doubles work is you have to roll at the beginning of the game to see which army
Yes.
is the primary army, and perhaps unfortunately for them, Alisha, who was playing Bolg, rolled higher, and so Bolg became their primary leader. We, of course, were playing the Beorning's Legendary Legion, and so therefore Beorn was our primary leader. And this was
So we then
an
rolled up.
interesting list, right? There was a bunch of hunter orcs in each army, so it must have been
So I think it was Azog from Azog's Legion with Gundabad and I think 3
yeah,
bats.
something like that, and then a bunch of hunter orcs.
And then the Goblin Mercenaries, and then Bolg with a bunch from Azog's Hunters with a bunch of Hunter Orcs, and Thimble the Hunter and a
Yeah,
bunch more Hunter Orcs.
yeah. So we'll move along into getting into game one, where we ended up being the attacking force. So Bolg had to deploy in the middle.
Yeah.
As if you're watching this, you can kind of see from this picture. But basically, Bolg went in the middle and was surrounded by this cloud of hunter orcs. Azog deployed after us, but deployed on the right hand side because Ben and I basically sort of took the center. Like we just stayed on our entire force on one side of them. We didn't really want to be split up, and we're just directly in front of Bolg and his cloud of hunter orcs.
Yeah, and the terrain wasn't really going to matter too much for this game. You can see there's a scattering of trees around, there's a couple of Dol Guldur ruins, but basically we could have deployed anywhere and just for convenience deployed where we were standing with the intention of rushing in as fast as we could. So we take first turn priority, and I had deployed Grimbeorn within charge range. So Grimbeorn turns into a bear, charges in, my Beornings run up to back him up, and I think Alisha charges Bolg off of one flank into some guys, so that he's a couple of there's a wall of hunter orcs between him and Grimbeorn, basically.
Yeah, I also turned into a bear naturally. I didn't deploy within charge range, but just moved up. That was probably a mistake. I probably should have, but
We play this army.
Yeah,
not
I mean, and
terribly
also
often, so I
like
think we made a couple of errors.
it's
over our
also
game.
like I don't necessarily think you want to throw one of the bears in. They are hard to kill, but they're certainly not impossible to kill. So yeah, it probably would have been better to move up and make sure we got the two bears in. But it was also like the nature of the terrain and where the table was and how he deployed. I wasn't actually sure if he deployed anyone on the 6-inch line, so I'm not actually sure if I was supposed to be within a 6-inch move of any of the orcs. So I just didn't really think about it.
Fair enough. Unfortunately, Grimbeorn, he's Grimbeorn. He charges into those hunter orcs and he flubbed his roll. Sam. Grimbeorn loses the fight to the hunter orc that he's fighting, and then takes a wound from the hunter orc that he's fighting. And in what becomes a theme for me for this tournament, I've been afflicted by your fate curse, Sam. I failed my first fate roll and I had to spend a second point of fate, which I did fortunately pass. I haven't got the full Sam affliction where you just fail all three fate one at a time in spectacular fashion every single time. It's great. Yeah, but so Grimbeorn loses two fate to a hunter orc, but we do manage to kill 3 hunter orcs in return. But I also believe that Bolg, I think, killed 1 or 2 Beornings this turn. Either that we took 2 casualties and 3 kills over that. So not a great exchange for the Beornings, really.
But could be worse. Could be worse. So turn 2, and I think Azog basically piled in on the side and stayed outside of charge range of Beorn, I believe. But I think within...
No, this was the turn, so
I know. I was talking about turn 1 because we didn't say what Azog did on turn 1. He just moved up. I believe he stayed outside of 8 inches of Beorn, but was within 10 inches because turn 2, they won priority, and we decided to not call a move. Which there are definitely some situations, I think, in this tournament where we should have spent might and didn't. But I think for the most part, this is, you're not overly upset about not calling the move, especially because it was not a guaranteed thing that Azog would charge in. But I believe he did. I believe Azog charged into Beorn, And as you can see, if you're viewing, as Bolg went into some more Hunter Orc or some more Beornings. I think one Hunter Orc got into Grim Beorn. And we just had some combats.
Yeah, Sam. And while we're talking about the pictures on screen, you can see in the foreground there our sweet new Gondor Calls for Ale dice. These were made for us by our sponsor, the Baron of Dice. As like all his dice, they are hand swirled resin. You got those nice square corners, nice heavy dice, and you can get yourself any of his dice online, through the Baron of Dice on his website, and we do a discount code, which you can find through the link on our Facebook page, our Instagram page. I think it'll be, maybe if we get our shit together, it'll be in the YouTube video as well. Or you can just remember it because it's really simple. Go get yourself some Baron of dice at the checkout cart, put in GCA, as in Gondor Calls for Ale, GCA, and get yourself a sweet discount on some dice. Or if you're looking for yourself for some very special Gondor Calls for Ale dice, just shoot us a message on one of our social media platforms, and we will let you know about getting yourself a set of those.
Yep. I just to make sure we're crystal clear, it would be super helpful to us if you went to the Baron of Dice website using the link that's in both on our link tree and in the description of this episode, wherever you're listening to it, because that's what enables him to track who's buying through us. And then, as Ben said, use that promo code capital G, capital C, capital A to get yourself a nice discount on some dice. And I think this game, it proved that the Baron of Dice are perfectly balanced, Ben, because as we got into that combat, we got into a very naturally called strike-off, where Azog, being a piteous fight 7 into Beorn's mighty fight 8, had to call a strike. Azog rolls his dice and gets a 1, I believe, and Beorn rolls his dice and gets higher than Azog, his Baron of Dice, doing him proud, Ben. So I do have to then spend a point of might to win the fight, but worth doing, I think. Worth doing.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting while we're talking about dice that Richard rolled pretty terribly, not only for the strike. I have it noted down in my notes here that he had to spend 2 points of will from Azog to complete his charge into Beorn. Beorn, of course, causing terror. I think Azog rolled like a 3 high or whatever, and so he had to spend 2 points of will to charge into the bear, and then didn't strike up.
Yeah, but naturally playing for fun rather than just striking at Azog, I went for the old bear hug. That strength 10 hit. Right. And unfortunately, Ben, I rolled a 1. I must not have been using my Gondor Calls for Ale dice. I rolled a 1. I needed a 3. I didn't even have 2 might to spend. But even if I'd rolled a 2, I probably wouldn't have done it. I should have just struck him. But what's the fun in that? Or I could have hurled him. There were many other things I could do. But it's not often you get to bear hug. And even though it wasn't Bolg I was trying to bear hug to death, I was attempting to give him a movie death, or a book death, I should say, not the movie death. So, alas, we did no wounds to Azog, but that's okay. It also doesn't matter doing no wounds to him, because he's not the primary leader.
No, but we, while Beorn and Azog were slogging it out, we had an epic fight phase elsewhere. Thimble had charged into 2 of Sam's Beornings, and I threw 2 or 3 more Beornings into him. And so Thimble calls the heroic strike because he's tied fight with the Beornings, and he strikes up higher than Beornings. But then on his 3 dice, Alisher rolls a 3 high, so he can't even. And we got the 6 with our fistful of Beorning dice, and so he can't even spend his last 2 points of might to take it. And poor Thimble just gets chopped down this turn on turn 2. With 2 might left in the bank, just annihilated by.
It was funny because when he charged in, and we decided to put I think we had at least 4, if not more.
At least 4,
and
if not 5.
He charged into a couple, and Ben and I decided to charge more. And sort of after we'd done that, I kind of realized, and I was talking this through, I was like, ooh, this is really silly. He's going to spend a point of might. He'll be higher fight than us. And then all he needs to do is roll a 4, and he wins the fight. And if he rolls the 4 and wins the fight, he's probably killing at least 2, if not more of them, maybe all 3. So it was risky, but then Alisher went ahead and rolled a 3 high. It just didn't matter.
Yeah, he's only strength 4, and honestly, if he'd had to burn all 3 of his might to kill 2 Beornings, I think I'd have been okay with that.
Yeah, I was more okay with
just being him that much might not
without
Lord. Yeah, but as it was, Thimble chopped apart by Beornings this turn, and Bold loses his Warg. I think he lost a
I
fight
think
to
he
some
did.
Beornings, and his
I think
Warg
he
gets
ends up
chopped down.
fighting like one of them or two, and just Ben went for the mount kill, which is something I tend not to bother doing, but you know, I
Oh, Bold is so much less scary on his
yeah
on
yeah
foot,
yeah. No, that's
especially like he's the one that would annihilate 2 to 4 Beornings a turn on his
yeah, that's
own.
true. But we also have two bears, and we were doing a pretty
That's
good
true.
job, I
That's
think,
true.
of clearing
Yeah.
out the hunter orcs, and we're eventually making a path to Bolg. And
Oh boy, did we do a pretty good. We Sam didn't lost track
I
of the
just
kill tallies
stopped.
over this game, so I ended up keeping track of the kill tallies. So he may not be looking at his score sheet and noting, but we got a whopping 9. I'm sorry, we got a whopping 8 kills this turn and lost another 2
Just
Beorn
so
in this turn.
that's so ridiculous. I mean, we needed
It was just
threes, right, with
ridiculous.
the great
Yeah, threes to kill
the
Hunter
two
Orcs with
handed,
the axe
and
guys.
even the bow guys needed fours, which is again the reason
Yeah,
why, as we said in the list building, like you just give them all the great axes. Also
yeah, just
because
give them
it's
all
a
the great
pain to
axes.
keep track
And
of.
Richard was flying around with those bats, plucking people. He didn't knock anyone over, but he got a number of wounds. And we had, we took some wounds on Beornings. You can see the wound tokens out, but
Yeah, I think they
yeah,
did a reasonable amount of wounds spread across the force over the game, but they just didn't kill that many.
yeah. But we move onwards into turn 3, where they once again take priority, and this time I decide to call a heroic move with Grimbeorn, who is far enough away from Azog that he's not getting the Master of Battle, but also I think Beorn was outside of
Yeah, I
6 as
believe
well,
so.
right? He was not inside the heroic move. But I think the point of my move here was to oh, that's right, yeah. So Grimbeorn calls the move. He's out on a flank, and I don't have it marked down that they counter move, so we get to move first over there. We move a bunch of Beornings in, and basically we set up the 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 system here where we bulk this turn. Oh no, sorry, I'm getting a turn ahead. That's next turn. Yeah, so I call a move. I charge back in, which takes it back over to Sam's flank, where Azog re-engages Beorn, and we get back into another combat save where we get another strike off. Sam, do you want to tell us about your strike
Yeah,
off with
yeah.
Azog?
I Azog calls the strike from I think the White Wog, and I
Yeah.
believe, and I call the strike, and I don't know who if I strike the. I assume I strike the 10, and I have a feeling that Azog once again like rolls a 1. Uh,
I think he got
well,
a 2.
I think I was higher, but I didn't get the 6, and Azog did get the 6.
Yep.
So he won the fight,
Yep.
and then obviously being the master, he only needs threes to wound Beorn, and he got 3 wounds out of his 4. So yeah. Oh, I think maybe did he roll badly as well? Did he roll badly and spend some might to do that?
You have to spend a point of might. I spend a point of Azog's
So
might
I
on
had
that.
3 wounds to take, Ben, and naturally I picked up my Baron of Dice to roll my bear saves. Rolled it, blam, 2 6s, no problem, and then took my first point of fate and passed it as well. It's just like absolutely absurd. It felt
So
kind of bad
obnoxious.
because it was,
So
because
obnoxious.
then they had like spent this like 2 points of might, one for the strike, one for the additional wound, and that I think was a fine thing to do, but you
Yep.
can't count on Sam rolling hot, and I did roll hot
No.
and saved 2 of them. I had visions of that ridiculous Nova doubles game where we were fighting the Dragon Emperor, and I just passed 1,000 saves, and just Grimbeorn survived for turns after turns where he shouldn't. But this time it was Bjorn just
No.
shrugging off blows from the Pale Orc, so that was very satisfactory.
And elsewhere in the combat phase, we killed another 9 orcs this turn and lost 3
Hmm.
more Bjornings. Bolg called a heroic combat to go do Bolg things. And then we get right on into turn 4, where Alicia and Richard once again take priority. We decide to let them have
Well,
it.
I'm out of might at this point as
Azog,
well.
of course. Yeah. I think they just tied up Bjorn this
Yeah.
time, Sam, and let Azog run rampant. So they throw a Hunter Orc or a Gundabad Orc into Bjorn, tie him down, Azog goes running off to get into some combats. Bolg goes running off to get into some combats. And there's this narrow little alley. I managed to get Grimbeorn set up. So in the combat phase, I call a heroic combat with Grimbeorn, and he is within threat range of Bolg. So they call a heroic combat with Azog. So basically, if my combat goes first and I go into Bolg, Azog's combat goes second, and then Azog runs into Grimbeorn, and now it's this like counter fight thing. I don't quite remember whose combat goes first, but it doesn't matter because Azog actually fails to win his heroic combat. He doesn't win against the Beorning that he's fighting, or doesn't kill it. I don't quite remember how it goes, but Azog doesn't get to move. Fails his heroic combat this turn. My heroic combat goes off. I have to spend a point of might to win that fight, but I charge into combat, get into Bolg, and kill Bolg this turn. And then we roll to see, and they are also broken at the top of this turn. We only managed to kill another 3 orcs. Their dice were finally heating up. Ours were finally cooling down, but it was a little too late at this point. The game ended on a roll of a 2, and it was a 10-0 victory to us.
Yeah, because you killed Bolg on that last turn. Beorn
who was the
unwounded.
primary leader.
We definitely had the middle, and then neither of us had any banners. So yeah, a major victory, which ended, I think, 45 minutes or so after the game began. So we got a nice long lunch.
Yeah, definitely one where not only did we didn't roll particularly hot. We rolled well, but our opponents rolled very poorly during some situations, and that sort of just helped the game end that much more quickly. They were making all the right calls, they won all the priorities, and it just didn't matter.
Yeah, it is
against the fury.
It is
of
funny
the
I
Bears.
didn't get to charge once with Beorn this game.
That's true.
Because the one turn we had priority, he was out of range.
He was out of range.
Oh well, no monstrous charge for me. Don't need it. So moving into game 2, where I will give us a run through of the scenario that we played for game 2, which is of course a clash of champions, where you have 24-inch up deployment zones. The game
sounds like a George R. R. Martin
book. Yes, indeed it does. The game lasts until a turn in which one force has been reduced to 25% of its starting number, and you have victory points. Keep a count of how many kills the leaders of both forces score in combat throughout the course of the battle. Note, kills caused by shooting, magical powers, or the hurl brutal power attack do not count towards your leader's score. You score 3 victory points if your leader has killed more models than your opponent's leader. If your leader has killed at least 2 models and at least twice as many as your opponent leader, instead you score 5. If your leader has killed at least 3 models and 3 times, then you score 7. You score 2 victory points for each enemy leader that has been killed in combat by one of your team's leaders, and you score 1 victory point if the enemy army is broken at the end of the game. And we have a special rule, which is pretty saucy when you've got 2 bears running around, Ben. And that is a friendly rivalry. Whilst the 2 allies' leaders are fighting alongside each other, they are still both trying to prove that they are the better fighter of the 2. Keep a record of how many kills the leaders of both forces have in combat individually for each army. Whichever of the 2 leaders has the least kills out of the combat, they gain a +1 bonus to wound during the fight. This bonus ends immediately as soon as they have drawn equal to or overtaken their ally. Oof. So bears wounding on 2s. Pretty okay.
Yeah, what's not to love about bears wounding on 2s?
It's not bad. It is not bad. And we were playing this one. Unfortunately, we didn't do a great job. I certainly did a terrible job. But we didn't do a great job of taking pictures in this game. So this first picture, if you're watching, is quite a while, I think, after the game has begun. But we were playing against a Arnor allied with Lothlorien. Thank you. I was like, Celeborn, no, that's the character. So they had Celeborn, Arvandui, and Melbeth, and a reasonable number of guys.
Yeah, I think it was in the 40 model count range.
Yeah, I think it was high 30s, but either way, we were significantly outnumbered.
Yeah, that Malbeth save, and they had a handful of the Palace Guard with the pikes. They got some Fight 6 elf spear supports running around there.
Yeah, that definitely makes a difference. When you're Fight 5, having somebody be able to appear as Fight 6 is pretty annoying. But having two
Absolutely.
bears is definitely a decent way to counter that problem. All right, so should we get into it? Turn one, Ben. Turn one goes to us.
That's right. And Malbeth
Yup.
calls a move.
And I think I was deployed basically in front on the right hand side in front of the Arnor contingent, and you were more on the left. And we were effectively a pretty big clump, but you were more on the left,
Yep.
fighting the Lothlorien contingent. And the way we deployed ended up being a little bit unfortunate because I went down first, and so I put Beorn behind my lines, but also like kind of up against this ruin. And I was like, oh well, great, he's just going to be able to transform and run around to the left. And after I told Ben like we should just deploy in one big block in the middle, he just continued my line, and I didn't really think about it at the time. So there was no hole
Neither
for
did I.
Beorn to come out of. There was just like he was kind of stuck behind this line of Beornings, and I couldn't. My base couldn't fit behind this line of ruins. So the fact that they called a move and then engaged this whole line of Beornings with Arnor warriors meant that Beorn was a little bit stuck. But
It did. So he ended up coming all the way around my flank and basically abandoned his warband of Beornings to fight it out with the Arnor
Yeah.
warriors. And he came all the way around the left flank with Grimbeorn because I had left a hole for Grimbeorn, and it was my fault for basically I didn't leave a hole for Beorn. I just didn't think about it. You know, like I said earlier, we don't play this army very often, and we definitely made a couple of tactical errors with the old Beornings.
And the biggest thing about that really is that you lose that 6-inch banner, which is so important.
Yeah, so important, especially when you outfight those Arnor warriors over
But
there.
you did to do that. We pulled a sneaky maneuver where Grimbeorn charged in as a man, and Beorn turned into the bear and charged in, and then Grimbeorn called a heroic combat.
Yeah, which let us remove the one elf that was sort of holding the flank in these ruins. There wasn't room for two bears to fit there, but a bear and a man can. And according to the FAQ, you can turn into a bear off of a heroic combat. So Grimbeorn turns into a bear and off of the heroic combat and goes charging off. And both he and Beorn managed to get one kill each this turn. And their warriors pick up the extra slack, and we deal a total of 6 kills to our opponent, and take 2 casualties. Celeborn spends a point of his might to get +1 to his duel to win against those Beornings, because Celeborn does not want to lose a fight to a Beorning with a great axe.
That is very true. And then turn 2 went to them, and again we decided not to call a heroic move this turn, so sort of lines relock. Arvandui and Malbeth are on our right hand flank, and they're pushing into my Beornings. That actually, I think I took a bunch of wounds, but then throughout this game they do a surprisingly good job of holding off, because we get into combat and both Celeborn and Arvandui call a combat. I don't really remember what Celeborn does. I assume he kills the Beorning he's into, or maybe the 2, and goes into some others.
I think this is actually close to where this picture was taken. So Celeborn called his heroic combat to run away from Beorn. So he like carves through our line of Beornings through the middle with the bears on the flank, so that he can basically run away from the bears for a turn.
But Arvandui, on the other hand, I think him and like I think he had a friend and 2 spear supports. They call the potentially risky combat, don't get the 6, or if they do, I think they got the 6 as well.
You also
and
got
then
the
roll off went to us, and I did 2 wounds to Arvandui, who who failed both of his Malbeth saves, but did pass his 1 fate. So luckily for them, Arvandui survived.
I think he rolled a 2 on his 1 point of fate and had to spend 2 points of might. Yeah, he rolled a 2 on, so he failed both his Malbeth saves, rolled a 2 on his single point of fate, so he's now taking 2 wounds, and he's only got 2 points of might left. So he spent both his remaining points of might to not die. Arvandui eats a wound from the Beorning.
Not bad, but
fight 5 characters.
But in some ways, it may have been better to let him die, just because we wouldn't have got points for killing him because it wasn't done by a leader. But you also, so it's it's a tough thing, and it's not like he's out fighting the Beorning, so I don't know. But that's what they decided to do. However, it was a pretty brutal turn. We killed 6, but lost 5 in return.
Yeah, we started to take some serious casualties this turn. I think Celeborn did some serious damage this turn with his heroic combat. I have it marked down that he got 3 kills on his own this turn.
So
which takes us to turn 3.
yeah, where
I think,
we
Sam.
win. So I should say, actually, yeah, it was
Yeah.
last turn. I have a note written that is just continuing the previous turn's thing. That this was where, as I mentioned in the previous game, we decided to save some might, and I think we should have called a move here because they were able to tag Beorn. If we had moved first, Beorn would have been able to get into Celeborn and get the charge off. And then what ended up happening was Celeborn called a heroic combat, killed several Beornings, and then got a turn or 2 away. And then I think Beorn actually lost this combat, which is even extra frustrating. But so luckily I think at that point I think Celeborn must have had Celeborn was out of might after calling that combat. Arvandui.
After calling that move, Celeborn calls the move. That's his last point of might. We don't counter move. When you're right, we should have counter move.
Right. So Celeborn is out of going into turn 3. Celeborn's out of might. Arvandui's out of might, and we're sitting on 5 between the 2 bears. So we definitely had it to spend, but it did mean that we could take every single other move we wanted if we wanted it. But turn 3 goes to us, and we re-engage. I think here we're able to get. I think Beorn can't fit round into Celeborn, and has to just charge back into a couple of elves. Grim Beorn is now sort of all the way, as you can see maybe in this picture, all the way back on my side where Beorn initially started.
Yeah, so this was good.
The next turn.
So on turn 3, Grim Beorn calls a heroic combat to go charging off. He kills the last couple elves and then goes charging off to eat into some Arnor guys, which takes us into turn 4, where we also take priority. They're completely out of might at this point. And Grim Beorn goes charging into Malbeth the Seer and calls another heroic combat, eats Malbeth, and then goes charging into some Arnor guys, prepping himself to go eat Arvandui the following turn. But before I get into that, Sam, I think Beorn and Celeborn get into their throwdown.
Yeah, so Beorn uses one of his might to call a combat, which he wins, kills the one dude he's fighting, gets into Celeborn. I then have to spend a point of might to win that fight, but 4 attacks, knocking Celeborn over with the higher fight, and then just absolutely eat Celeborn in 1 turn. Because as well, Beorn has not been having the best game, and so Grim Beorn is on higher kills than him at this point, and so I'm getting +1 to wound. So I think I do need. It must be 3s, but.
Yeah, 3s.
Still not bad. Yeah. So they lose Malbeth and Celeborn this turn, which takes us into turn 5, where the priority goes to them.
Where they win a priority.
Pardon?
But they win priority turn 5, but it's too late. Beorn calls a move, and it's all over. Grim Beorn goes into Arvandui, and they're broken at the top of the turn. Arvandui gets eaten by Grim Beorn in the combat phase, and this game ends with a 10-1 victory to us.
Yeah, not bad at all. So a classic Gondor calls for Aelstar, with 2 major victories going into round 3.
Yep, absolutely classic stuff. So onwards, Sam, into round 3, where we faced Dakota and Jordan and played Scenario 2, Total Conquest, which is the doubles version of the Maelstrom mission. So the 2 doubles forces are broken in half, and one half of each force deploys within 6 inches of the center of the board. And I should say, too, that we have 5 objectives on the board. They are scattered along the diagonals and 1 in the center, like the 5 pattern on a dice, I always like to say. So then Team A's primary force deploys within 6 inches of the center objective. Team B's primary force deploys within 6 inches of the center objective. And then the secondary forces enter via the Maelstrom rule. And our opponents had dwarves. Oh boy, did they have a lot of dwarves. It was like 42 43 dwarves. They had the army of Thror, who ended up being the primary leader after the roll-off, and there were some number of Grimhammers and a number of Erebor dwarves with spear and shield, and then they had Dane Ironfoot on the War Pig, and I think he had one or two goat riders, maybe it was 3 goat riders, and a couple of crossbows, and a bunch of Iron Hills dwarves.
No crossbows.
Oh, no crossbows.
But Thror's,
no crossbows, just like 3 goat riders and 15
Thror's
dwarves.
army also had an Erebor captain. Worth noting.
Oh, that's right.
And as I was the primary leader, I went in the middle. This is by far the worst possible scenario, I think, for the Beornings in the doubles. Oh. It's a small model count army, and you need to be holding objectives. And then, of course, we went into a matchup of just loads of models. Like, they massively outnumbered us, but that's fine. So we get into turn 1. Turn 1 priority goes to them.
Hang on a sec, Sam. Sorry, I messed it up. I should go through the victory conditions for the scenario. I just went through deployment and then didn't read out the victory conditions. So you score 2 victory points for each objective marker that has at least one of your models and no enemy models within 3 inches of it. You score 1 victory point for each objective marker that has both friendly and enemy, but more friendly models within 3 inches of it. 1 victory point for wounding the enemy leader, and 1 victory point if the enemy force is broken. And of course, we have the Maelstrom of Battle special rule for the secondary forces.
Yep, and now we'll get into it where I jumped the gun earlier. But turn 1 goes to them. I was absolutely terrified of those Grimhammers with throwing weapons. I guess they need 5s, but I was just like envisioning my front rank of Beornings all starting this game on 1 wound, which you just like really don't want when I was outnumbered already. So after the concern of last game about not calling a move when I thought I should, I decided to call a move on turn 1. They didn't counter call, so I got the charge in, locked up all of these Grimhammers. I was able to transform Beorn and get into a couple of dwarves. Dane rolls on and comes on our right hand side. And then you roll like a 2, and so they get to choose.
I rolled a 2, and I didn't want to spend 2 points of might to make it a 4, or 1 point of might to make it a 1. I just didn't want to, if I'd rolled a 3, I'd have spent might on it to make it a 4. So they choose, and they put me within 6 inches of the corner opposite from Dane. So Grimbeorn is going to be taking a while to arrive into the middle of the board this turn. This game, unfortunately,
definitely not ideal, but we get into combats, and it doesn't go very well for me. My dice were definitely a little cool this time, because I lose 2 Beornings, and then I think Beorn kills 2 dwarves. I think he's the one who's able to get any of the kills, which is not bad, but I definitely need to be trading up.
I have 3 kills to 2 casualties for this one, on my score sheet. But yes. So we take the next turn priority, and no moves are called, but Dane Ironfoot decides to call a heroic march to get his warriors closer to the bears.
Yeah, and boy do they're like shoved right up there. But because we got the priority, the way things had moved, I was actually able to get Beorn into 3 dwarves this turn, which was pretty nice. And then I decide to call a heroic combat because I'm within 8 inches of Dane. So I was like, well, we can try and bulk Dane, and that's exactly what we did. So Dane spends his 2nd point of might to call a strike. Beorn wins his combat and just absolutely rips through 3 dwarves, and then it goes into another 1 or 2 because I decide not to go into Dane, which maybe I should have, honestly, but decided not to.
He's fight 6.
Pardon? Yeah,
he's fight 6,
so he probably would have gone higher, but I was rolling 4 dice. He only hit 3. Anyway, doesn't really matter. That didn't happen. I also had 2 might to his 1, so didn't go into Dane, but killed some more dwarves. And
I ran across the board. I left a couple of my bow guys near the one objective that I moved in. I sent, I think, 2 or 3 guys were heading towards the center, but also towards the other objectives, so that they could be like, we can mob this objective if the dwarves retreat back to it, or if they don't retreat back to it, we can send one guy and the other two can peel off to the center, and then Beorn, of course, transforms into a bear, races towards the center. In fact, I did the Beorning thing where I moved onto the board, I surrounded Beorn with Beorning so that when he turned into a bear, I got to shunt some of my Beornings a little bit further forward. It's called the Beorning March. Beornings don't have access to March, they have access to shunt Beornings when they turn into a bear.
The bear pedo.
The bear pedo.
Which is also something else if you think about that. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Don't Google it.
So, turn 3 goes to them. We decide not to call any moves because you're still kind of far out there. I'm down to 1 might. So I told a lie a moment ago when I said I would have had 2 to Dane's 1. I believe Dane charges into Beorn this turn.
Yeah, they just decide to go for it.
Fully support. We get into some combats here, and Dane calls a strike. I think I decide to let it go.
You decided you elected not to.
I don't know whether, I think Dane must have rolled a 5 high. Oh, he rolled a 1 on his strike.
Dane rolled a 1 on his strike. Yeah. Dane gets the 1 on his strike.
But did get the 6. Either way, I spent a point of might to win the fight. And then what did I decide to do? I strongly debated hurling him and just like getting him kind of like a pretty long distance out of there. But I think I decided to rend him, right? And did 2 wounds, and he just took both wounds and saved all his fate.
Ivedy loses 1 wound and spent all 3 fate. So he eats a wound, but had to spend all of his fate as well.
Whatever it is, but then we have some other decent kills. We lose 2 Beornings and kill 4 dwarves. So not great, but not terrible either. I think there was a point earlier last turn where Beorn, after he won his combat, I could have run him into the Erebor captain, and that's what I should have done because I would have been able to very easily flash kill him. Because in turn 4, the priority goes to us, and the captain calls a move, and you counter move with.
I counter with Beorn, who is now within range to actually do something about the situation in the center of the board. But unfortunately, the move goes to the Erebor captain.
Yeah. So again, a regret for not getting it. I don't at this point. Like I'm pretty low on models, I think, and low on resources.
Well, you've taken 4 casualties, so half your army's gone.
So I don't really know what happens here apart from we go into combat. I think Dane's fighting a couple. I don't know.
Dane just moved. I think Dane moves away to try and get away from Beorn, and then they just send a pile of dwarves into Beorn. Like Dane runs away, and they just pile Erebor dwarves into him.
Yeah, I have
because that's the heroic combat. That's Dane's strike.
Yeah, I have that Dane gets knocked off his pig this turn, and I don't know why that is. Either way, it doesn't matter. You call the combat, correct, this turn?
I do call the combat with Beorn in an attempt to try and get some kills and do some damage to these dwarves. Which I think I don't know. We got a total of like 4 kills this turn, so we did not have a terribly successful turn. As far as that goes,
I have 5, anyway. But
okay.
Yeah. I think as well this turn they do. My notes aren't overly clear. It's actually pretty hard to take notes for doubles. I think this picture we just pulled up. I think this is the actual turn. Anyway. It doesn't matter. So I think this is the actual turn, and they basically just put like 1,000 dwarves into Beorn. I lose the fight and take enough wounds that I burn through all 3 of my fate. I think I fail them all. Maybe I pass 1 or 2. It was not the spectacular pass 2 bear saves and then just shrug the rest with fate. Or maybe that was the next turn. That was turn 5. So turn 5 goes to them. I'm just sort of going to race through the rest of this game, Ben. I don't think there's much point in belaboring this point. Turn 5 goes to them. This is the picture from turn 5. It happened. Maybe I won last turn. Doesn't matter. They pile a bunch of stuff into Beorn. I fail all 3 fate. We lose a total of 7 or 6 models this turn, and only kill 4 dwarves. I think at this point the only model I have left is Beorn. Turn 6 goes to them. Beorn is killed. Same thing happens. We won this priority, but they had the annoying Ring of Durin, so they re-rolled and got the priority. As I said, Beorn dies. We lose another 4 Beornings and only kill 2 dwarves that I have noted down. I then started packing up stuff as I was dead, and I think
all the Sam's models were off the board, which left me for the last 2 turns. So we had a couple of Beornings fighting 1 dwarf on a corner objective, which I managed to kill the dwarf and claimed that objective for us. There was another. The Erebor captain managed to get within range of the one objective where I had a Beorning just sitting on the objective, and the Erebor captain was like just within 3 inches of it. So it's going to be the last turn of the game. If my Beorning wins the fight, the Erebor captain backs up. That objective's ours. If I lose the fight, no one gets the objective because we each got 1 model within 3 inches of it. You lose the fight, so no one scores that objective. And Grim Beorn spends a couple of turns fighting with Thror, who doesn't do very well on his strikes, rolls a 1 on his strikes, but still wins the combat and manages to put a couple of wounds on Grim Beorn. The dwarves hold the other 2 corner objectives, and we lose this one 7-3.
Yeah. So disappointing, sort of not surprising given the scenario and given the army match ups, but another sort of classic Gondor calls for ale. Win the first 2 and then lose the last one, certainly at Adepticon. But still an enjoyable game.
Yeah, I think it's a bit classic Beorning too. They're like actually not that strong in doubles because you're so often split up.
Yeah.
They don't like to be split up. They're not, they're slow at getting
Yeah,
together.
I mean, maybe thinking about it, what we should have done is I should have backed up just away from the center and reformed our line. Our opponents did take quite a long time to make a bunch of decisions, so I think we would have lost this even if we had done that. And if we had infinite time and could have done that, I think it could have been a different game. But we didn't have infinite time. I think eventually we would have timed out and they would have had the numbers to hold the objectives. So
yeah. And I didn't even think
I didn't either until literally just now.
Yeah, that would have been interesting. Well, maybe next time if we play the Beornings and draw that scenario, that's what we'll try.
So yeah, we ended up. I can't. Do you remember the?
I think it was seventh of 64 players. 60,
I
62
think
teams.
I want to say 8th, but 7th or 8th. We were definitely up there, which is not bad. I mean, we had oodles of victory points because there were so many people on 2-1, right, with only 3 games, and we scored 20. It must have been 23, or something, and
23 victory points.
So we were doing rather well out of a possible 36, right? We weren't down by that many.
Yeah. And our loss is only a minor loss too, which did make a difference.
So yeah, an enjoyable event, and we couldn't quite get that Nova doubles repeat to come in 3rd, but they only give out first place trophy at Adepticon, and obviously there's like a best display and best painted army and stuff I think as well. But the doubles trophy was one of those beautiful Lord of the Rings Forge World doubles trophies with the 1 ring. So going into game 3, it was I was disappointed to have not won this.
It could have been ours, Sam. It should have been ours.
Could have been. But and of course, between rounds 2 and 3, I've been humming and hawing about buying some Beornings for a while because I like to play with my own models when possible. I do love being able to borrow Jake's, but I was like, we've borrowed Jake's so many times at this point. Perhaps I should spend some money and prove my love for the Beornings and all things Middle Earth, and then naturally the after I bought a couple packs of them, we went and lost the last game. So I was joking with Ben that I was going to go return them because they clearly let me down.
Yeah. I want to talk, you mentioned favorite display. I want to talk about my favorite display. I didn't get to see the whole thing together, but there was a set of actually,
Yes.
Bill the Pony. First of all, Bill the Pony was there as a display board. Someone had their little rolly cart with a horse head and a fur blanket wrapped around it. So their rolly cart with the display board set on top of it was done up as Bill the Pony, which was fantastic. And then there was two other teams who between them had all the rings. Yeah. So they had Sauron and I think some of the Nazgul. So Sauron in one force because it's just 400 points. Then I assume some number of Nazgul and Orcs in the other force, and then the other two players had a good force where they had the 3 elf rings, some other number of kings of men, and some dwarves. Or maybe it was just all the 9 Nazgul made up the evil force.
I don't think it was the 9 Nazgul. I think it was just kings of men raves from the Minas Tirith army.
But then you can't do allies.
Maybe it was Nazgul. Anyway, but yeah. So they had the 1 ring, the 3 elven rings, they had 7 dwarf kings. They had 7 dwarf kings, 6 dwarf kings,
6 dwarf kings,
and 9 kings of men, probably split between ring wraiths and kings of men, which was pretty great. And their display boards were. Had like the back of it was a quarter of the 1 ring, so that when you put them all together, and they were like little pizza slices, big. Right? So when you put them all together, it was a big 1 ring, and it was pretty awesome. Cool. And the guys who were playing it were giving out ring pops, which was great.
Yeah. Not that we sponsored favorite theme at this event, but that would have won.
Goes for very good. Yeah, I like that as well. I mean, we attempted to make it kind of fun. We got bear claws to give out to people, but alas, we bought them a little early, and rather than being pre-packaged individual ones, it was just a like clam pack of pastries that by the time we played doubles were quite stale. But I did offer people stale bear claws. So.
No one took his.
I ate one. I was like, "Oof, this was not great. This was not great." But yeah, so I think that about wraps us up for our coverage of the Adepticon 2024 doubles. We will, of course, be seeing you, or you'll be seeing us or hearing us in a couple of weeks as we go through the grand tournament, which will be quite a lot because apparently it was more games than anticipated. But yeah. So this has been doubles, and I think before we go, Ben, unless there's anything else you want to talk about, let's talk about where we are going to be next.
All right. So coming up very shortly, in fact, as of recording this next weekend,
I think this will be out the day before.
Sam and myself will be going to the Smeagol and Deagle Good versus Evil tournament. Which I don't know where it is, Sam. I'm just following you.
Games and Stuff in Glen Burnie, Maryland.
Your hobby place? Games and Stuff, that's right.
Which is a 650-point optional Good versus Evil format, so that's going to be fun. This episode will be out the day before, so if you listen to it on release, there may still be some tickets, so you could go check that out. And then after that, I think checking my calendar here now. Sorry. On the 4th and 5th of May, there is the Richmond Open. It's also on the 3rd of May, which is the Friday, but that's just, I think, open gaming and narrative scenarios. And the Saturday is the 800-point grand tournament qualifier. If you place in the top 8 people on Saturday, you go on to play the final 3 rounds on Sunday. If you don't, you can automatically enter to attend the second breakfast tournament on Sunday, which is a 550-point tournament, and this is a Rob Loader run event, so there will be plenty of trophies, all of which will be absolutely awesome looking. So very excited for that.
And awarded for awesome things too. It's not just like trophies for like competing; it's trophies for coming from the furthest distance. For I think one of my favorite ones is the There and Back Again, which was like being on table 1 and being on table 12 and being on like moving up and down in the rankings the most, which is hilarious.
And then the 18th and 19th of May, we've got the Big Trouble in Little Dale. in Portland, Maine. That's 350 points. No hero over 100 points. That should be fun and interesting.
And that's at HuzzahCon.
Yes. And then after that, I don't have anything firmly on the books until Nova? I think that's right. Must be Nova.
Wow, really? So we got May. Nothing scheduled for June or July
yet. So yeah, but that's looking far into the future.
Right.
We'll continue to update you as these tournaments come out and start showing up. I think people don't necessarily always schedule them super far in advance, but rest assured there will be plenty more Gondor Calls for Ale, whether it's tournament coverage or we're scrambling to find episodes of anything else interesting. Speaking of other things that are interesting, Ben, getting in at the death, as they say. If you really have enjoyed listening to us and you want to listen to more of us right this second, you can, of course, check out our Patreon, where we have, I think we're up to 9 half pints now. We talk about all manner of things in those, Ben. We review every single scenario pool from the match play guide. We've got some faction reviews up there now as well. We, alas, didn't get to doing one this month, but there will be at least one, probably 2, maybe even more coming next month. So we definitely would really appreciate you checking that out. And supporting us there really makes us able to do this. And if you want to show your support, go there, and there'll be a free set of beautiful new Baron of Dice that you can get.
And if you enjoyed the video, please do subscribe to the channel. It helps with the feed the YouTube algorithm thing.
We know what we're doing.
We do appreciate all your support.
Sure. But until next time, we hope you have enjoyed this episode, and we will be back in 2 short weeks. Thank you for listening to Gondor Calls for Ale. We hope you have enjoyed this episode. We, at Gondor Calls for Ale, are officially sponsored by the Baron of Dice, the producer of premium wargaming dice. These beautifully hand-swirled resin dice have no microbubbles and are therefore perfectly balanced. With over 3,000 variants and unique designs, nearly every tabletop gaming system is represented. So check out the description of this episode for a link and a discount code. Go buy yourself some new dice and let the good times roll. We at Gondor Calls for Ale are not associated with Games Workshop, New Line Cinema, or the Tolkien Estate. We hope we have not misrepresented or offended anyone. These recordings are strictly recollections of games we've played and are not commentaries on the character or competence of our opponents. They are intended purely for entertainment, and we hope they will be taken as such. You can find us on Patreon, see the link in the description. Supporting Gondor Calls for Ale there helps us continue to produce these episodes. You can find us on Instagram at Gondor_calls_for_ale. Feel free to send us a message there. Or on Facebook as Gondor Calls for Ale, another great place to send us a message. Or you can send us an email at gondorcallsforale@gmail.com. As Boromir, Captain of the White Tower, once said, remember today, listener, today this episode was good.